Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode number 71, fourth season of the Fantasy Fullback Dive, brought to you by the good people at the Roto Street Journal. We're paving your way to fantasy glory and excellence. We are going to be your lead blocker on this journey, this just endless quest, really. Endless is the right word for it. This thing never really stops. I'm your host, Nat the Truth Jones. With me, as always, the Wolf of Roto Street himself. We got big news coming across the ticker right now. And the biggest news probably of all of them is we both got haircuts and we both look really good right now, at least relative to our normal looks. We've gone from 6.5s to 9s overnight, people. So, enjoy this video. Soak it up. How you doing, Wolf?
I am doing fantastic, outside the fact that my microphone decided to not work and I have to go back to my old first ever CAD, I think it's called, which I've been told is the worst microphone to ever exist. So I hope this doesn't sound too horrible, people. And I hope my haircut, if you're watching the video, makes up for the sound quality, because it certainly does. Hopefully you're getting the eye candy with this too, because soak that all in. And man, the excitement though is just unbearable at this point. We have three. I mean, I wanted to have this humongous free agency, like risers, fallers, penny stocks episode, but then I was making the agenda and it's like 2 hours in and I only had 3 people, and that's 3 fucking fantasy just stalwarts, premium talents, first rounders. OBJ, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. How can we not just dedicate an episode to these 3, because there's just such wide-reaching implications, not just for these guys, but everyone around them and their new teams, and then everyone they're leaving behind. It's enormous, so we have to cover those 3 in a standalone pod, and I can't wait to do it.
Yeah, you would be really hard-pressed to find 3 guys that we could cover, like, with such big news surrounding them in the span of, like, a couple days. At least as far as fantasy.
March,
I mean, these are 3 of the biggest names in football. Let's not kid ourselves.
When has this ever happened? Like, in March, that this 3 enormous-sized names all have massive moves. Like, has this ever happened? I don't even know. It's enormous.
Nothing comes to mind, I have to admit. I mean, obviously, it's a star-driven league as far as quarterbacks. I mean, your quarterbacks are your stars in this league. If you go beyond quarterbacks, and I mean, obviously there's some guys that transcend that. You got 2 of those guys in this thing right now, and Le'Veon Bell, I mean, arguably the best like all-around player in football. You have to say, I think he's his usage rate, his carries per game, the amount of use they give him is like the most in NFL history. So this is a really significant guy. OBJ, Antonio Brown. I mean, these are both guys that are, famous in their own rights and great football players. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about the trades. Obviously, 2 of these came by way of trades. We're going to talk about the free agent signing. Obviously, that's Le'Veon Bell. So it's a little bit of a drive-by episode, but we're going to go in depth. It's not going to be just like a quick take. We're going to talk about this to our heart's content, and then we're going to come back maybe even as soon as tomorrow with another podcast where we're going to talk about some of the other free agents and wheeling and dealing going on in the NFL. But this one was just a little bit too big for us to pass up on as far as one episode. So we're going to crank this thing out, end it as soon as we can. Hopefully I'll be able to see most of Survivor, which is on tonight, and I will edit the podcast during that, and we'll go from there. First of all, let's talk about the trade that is probably responsible for you having to change your underwear several times in the last, 12 hours or whatever. And that, of course, Odell Beckham Jr., the guy that last podcast I admitted I was kind of starting to come around on for the first time ever. OBJ to the Cleveland Browns. Truly the stuff of fantasy wet dreams. But I mean, not just dreams. Like this is the type of thing that can make you wet while you're awake.
Oh, I know. If I wore underwear, I'd be changing them constantly throughout the day. But
look, we're both free balling. Who are we?
Absolutely, but I've had to change my slacks quite a bit this day, because my God, Odell Beckham going to the Browns is enormous. I mean, we talk about fantasy wood lasting for 4 hours or longer. It's been permanent. It's tough to be a teacher when you got these type of implications going on. But overall, it's been
seated behind the desk a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. I haven't been. It's been finals week, thanks God, so I don't have to move at all. I can just hide behind my desk and dream about Odell Beckham heaving in passes from Baker Mayfield instead of Eli Manning. Just makes me so fucking happy and horny and excited, and oh my God, there's just the implications are enormous. I mean, you're an Odell hater, so
no, yeah. I told you last podcast I was starting to come around on him. I really did say that. I mean, I said I would take him before Antonio Brown last podcast, which is something you've never even remotely heard me say before.
Never.
This, of course, makes me much more interested in him. But like you said in the intro, there's so many implications around this trade that aren't just him. And I mean, I don't know, we can hit those one by one if you want. But I mean, the one that jumps out at me the most is Jarvis Landry. The guy pretty much proved to us he's not a number one guy. But I think he would be a great number 2 guy opposite Beckham. And now all of a sudden, as down as I was on him after last year, I'm very much back in again. How about you?
Oh, yeah. So Jarvis Landry's definitely, he's number 3 on my list of implications. But why don't we just start with him? I mean, these are former teammates. They know each other very well from their LSU days. They're best friends. They stay in constant contact. So you got to imagine one that just helps Odell Beckham mentally, which is obviously humongous for him, is the mental side of things, being content where he's at and not whining and bitching and throwing shit on the sideline. Going to Cleveland is going to be the absolute perfect antidote for all those antics. I think it's humongous for that mental side of Beckham and obviously Landry too, being with his best friend. And as you mentioned, Landry is the ideal number 2. He needs somebody clearing out that space for him, and there's no one better than Odell Beckham to create that space. The deep speed, the explosiveness, the ridiculous downfield catches, that's going to draw the defense's attention. And when Landry gets one-on-one catches, when he has space underneath, that's when he's by far at his peak, at his most effective. And this new air raid style offense, you got Todd Monken coming in with 23 years of experience running an air raid offense. They run the 4 crosses, the mesh routes that we talked about with Drew Hollingshead. Drew was very emphatic that any receiver that can do damage in space is unbelievable in this offense, because all it is designed to do is get them space, get the ball in their hands, and let them do their thing. There's no one better than Landry in that style of offense. He's going to rack up yardage after the catch. So yes, Landry, humongous winner. I had him down at like the low 70s before Odell came, because when he's getting doubled and he's the focal point of the passing game and the defense, and as a consequence of that, he's no good. But when he has that number 1 guy lifting the lid and giving him the space, there's very few that are as dangerous as him. So I think he's right back into that 100 potential catch mode with tons of yardage after the catch and this more explosive attack. I'm thrilled about Landry, but obviously at number 3 on my implications list, there's a lot more to cover.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Beckham is one of the guys that you're talking about on this list. I mean,
number 1. It's Beckham.
Okay, I didn't know if he counted as an implication. But let's talk about Odell Beckham. I was kind of casting him aside because I assumed that was the main course anyway. Yeah. Odell Beckham Jr. Aside from injuries, which has happened once or twice, I mean, like he's been just an offensive machine. The guy produces like crazy. He's such a large part of the Giants' offense, certainly a large part of their passing offense. It's just an understatement to even bring that up. Eli Manning is just garbage and has been for years, and the guy still produces. Baker Mayfield seems to be a guy that's very much on the up. And giving him a weapon like this, I mean, who knows? Maybe there'll be a sophomore slump for Baker. Maybe he won't pan out the way we think. But right now, all signs are pointing in a very encouraging direction. Yeah. And plus, I mean, all right. So let's talk about Odell for a second. What do you think? What are your predictions for what's the ceiling for this guy? And what's your floor? Like, barring injury, what do you think we're going to see out of OBJ?
I mean, we can just start kind of with that fantasy stock formula style breakdown that we love to do over here. The talent's indisputable. I think no one's going to argue that he's a top 5 receiver in the game, because of course he is. Some might even say he's the number 1 receiver in the game. I know you wouldn't, but there's a lot of people out there that consider him the most explosive, best young talent at the position. And he's in my top 3. I love the guy. I love what he can do. Just so explosive in his routes and his after the catch. Everything about the guy, just explosive. The one word that comes to mind when you see Beckham. Terror at every single layer of the field. There's not a route the guy can't run to perfection, and the hands are, there's nobody better. The one-handed catches, the acrobatic plays. He makes things happen when he's covered. He makes things happen when the ball's in his hands. The guy is a big play threat waiting to happen. And then you go and swap out, as you mentioned, the horrible Eli Manning, maybe the worst starting quarterback in the NFL right now, for Baker Mayfield, maybe the most exciting young guy in the NFL right now. And this is especially important because Baker Mayfield, even with a pretty shitty overall weapon cabinet last year, ranked number 2 in deep passer rating, especially under Freddie Kitchens when he took over. And meanwhile, Eli Manning ranked all the way down at 17. So that's an enormous jump for a guy.
Surprised. I mean, what do you think Eli Manning would have been without Odell Beckham?
It would have been nothing. It would have been absolutely pathetic.
That completely inflates. I was surprised to hear he was that high, but it completely inflates your numbers like that if you're a quarterback and you have a weapon like that.
And so much of it was after the catch too. Like, it looks better than it is because his average depth of target and whatnot ranked like in the bottom 5.
6 yards downfield was like a heave for him.
Right, exactly. It was pathetic. And then you get a guy that's made his money on the deep ball. 11 of his 27 touchdowns came on deep passes. That was the most ratio of deep passing touchdowns in the NFL. Baker is a master at the deep ball, and Odell's the most explosive threat in the league. That's going to be magic and money, especially when you put him, as we mentioned, Todd Monken, the air raid offense. You got 4 verticals, meshes, all this stuff designed to give him space. Nobody's more dangerous. I mean, Landry's as dangerous as it gets with the ball because he's more like a running back, but Odell can just catch a slant and then rip it past the entire defense like nobody else. There's no one that can catch this guy once he gets going. We haven't really seen that since his rookie year, but Todd Monken's a master at designing that style of play. So we'll see that. We'll see him going deep and vertical. We saw Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston in this air raid offense, even though those two are pretty shitty. Definitely less talents than we have with Baker Mayfield here. Those two led the league in pass yards per attempt. 8.8 for Fitzpatrick, 8.4 for Winston. That was 1 and 2 because Monken just loves the deep ball. So he gets a guy in Mayfield that can throw it better than either of those two by a mile. It's going to be a beautiful marriage of the coaching scheme, of the deep passing talent, and now the ultimate deep threat weapon in Beckham. So there's nothing but upside here. He rises in coaching scheme to a perfect 15 out of 15. He rises in surrounding talent from a paltry, which is where he was lowest because of Eli, from a paltry like 9 surrounding talent to now a 14 with Baker Mayfield. He drops a little bit in usage because there are more weapons here. Freddie Kitchens does like to spread the ball a bit more, so he takes like a 1-point hit in usage because even though he'll be used much better, he probably will see a less volume. I mean, Mike Evans had 140 or so targets last year, did a ton of damage with them, so the efficiency will spike, but the actual sheer volume might take a hit. But overall, it's clearly a win. He goes from an 88 stock score all the way up to a 95 for me right now. The risk is there. You mentioned the health. He's only he's played where is the stat right here? He's missed 21 games across 5 seasons, so he has missed a significant chunk of time in multiple years.
A lot of
but when he's on the field,
a lot of that was in 1 year, though. I mean,
yeah,
probably half of that was in 1 year.
Exactly. He ended last year missing 4 games. He started his rookie year missing 4 games. A lot of it is, annoyingly, those soft tissue injuries. I hate to see a guy have those recurring soft tissue things because those just tend to never go away. So I am nervous about the health. But, I mean, you look at this stat right here before I go on to other players. There's only 4 players who have 40-plus receiving touchdowns since 2014. We got Antonio Brown, who we're going to talk about momentarily, 59 touchdowns in 76 games. DeAndre Hopkins, I should actually just had you guess and see if you could have got them all because they're obviously monsters. DeAndre Hopkins, 45 and 79. Mike Evans had 40 and 77. And then, of course, Odell Beckham, he had 44. But whereas those guys all were, closer to 80 games, he had 44 touchdowns in 59 games. I mean, that's just an absurd scoring pace. There's no one as explosive as this guy, so obviously he gets the 5 out of 5 upside bonus. I think he's got the highest ceiling of any receiver in fantasy. He's up to number 3 on my wide receiver list. Number 11 enters the first round on my big board after ranking right around 23 or 4 with Eli Manning. I think just everything is such a massive stock up arrow for this guy. I can't wait to see what he does in Cleveland. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, I'm all in too. I'm excited about it too. I mean, I got to say, when I've been bashing Odell Beckham as, like when Jimbo's like, oh, I'm going to take him first and stuff like that. I mean, when I've bashed him the last 3 years or so, and just to be clear, if Jimbo's listening, I'm not suggesting first overall, but I know that you've been a huge OBJ homer. But the reason I've bashed him has always been because of Eli Manning. I've always been very consistent. Yep. I'm not going all in on a guy that's being thrown to by someone that shouldn't be an NFL quarterback. And that's changed now. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm not like an anti-wide receiver diva guy. I mean, I think, there's a place for these guys. They can thrive in certain environments, and maybe he's going to one right now. I mean, Baker Mayfield's a diva, so we'll see what happens.
I mean, you just mentioned the name that we need to talk about next. Talking about real quarterbacks is Baker Mayfield, who him and Odell, even before this trade happened, started to have a budding friendship, playing each other in video games, all that. And again, it sounds stupid to bring up things like that. He's best friends with Landry, and he has a friendship with Baker. But when you're talking about such a combustible guy that can just blow up on the sidelines and freak out, like, it is important to have those social connections for a guy like Eli Manning. For a guy like Odell Beckham. You get rid of an Eli Manning, and you get Baker Mayfield in there, and obviously his stock goes flying through the roof with this. We already were so much higher on him. We've talked about it on this podcast at length. He was our QB6 as compared to a QB 12 to 13 ranking. And this, of course, will get the sheep to start catching up. You got a guy like Odell Beckham coming in. It's going to send Baker's ADP through the roof. But just how high are they going to put him? And, I mean, we were so all in on Pat Mahomes last year, yet our ranking, we had him 10 spots higher at like QB9 versus like 18 for the experts, but that still just didn't reflect how much we praise this guy. And I feel like I'm not going to make that same mistake with Baker, because I truly see this guy throwing for 5,000 yards and maybe 30 to 40 touchdowns. So he's all the way up to my QB3 right now with this move. From number 6, the only guys I take over him, of course, Patrick God Mahomes and Andrew Luck, and that's kind of questionable. I'm not positive I would take Andrew Luck over him. I think I would, but maybe I even move Baker all the way up to 2. And Deshaun Watson in that tier and conversation as well, just because he's got so much upside and really picked it up at the end of last year. But for me, Baker could go as high as 2, and right now is my number 3 quarterback. We already loved him because Freddie Kitchens, the continuity of him staying there was huge. When he took over, Baker just blew up and had a 4,538 TD pace. And then you add in Todd Monken, who we've already raved about, brings those air raid concepts, talks about how he likes having fun, how can we be explosive. That's what the game's all about, big plays. I like big plays, and now you get the ultimate big play threat to go with the ultimate big play arm and Baker Mayfield. The mix is too perfect. The marriage is too beautiful for me not to love everything about Baker Mayfield. Just like we talked about with Mahomes, everything just stacked up so perfectly that the stock score went through the roof. There's nothing I don't like about Baker Mayfield's stock profile, so why not ranking all the way up at number 2? That's where he's going for me. I absolutely love him, and he's going to be the guy I go all in on. I don't like to take quarterbacks early. I feel like he's going to be like a 6th to 7th rounder that I end up sinking my teeth into, though.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't think your quarterback rankings are crazy at all. I'd obviously put Mahomes ahead of him, and then after that, it's like question mark. It's like there's
right?
two or three guys that maybe might be better, but I mean, I don't know. I might take him second. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, like you could see Luck doing better, but it's like one of these things for me in fantasy is, I mean, I like Baker's weapons cabinet a little better, and I'd rather pull for Baker. I'd rather watch Baker.
You want to exactly.
Like, if I'm like gun to my head, got to pick a quarterback after Mahomes, like I would definitely pick Baker before Luck.
Absolutely.
Can we move on to Antonio Brown? I mean, we did a lot of content there on OBJ. That's a lot, but I mean,
it's a
I'm
ton.
sure there's more.
Well, you got to look at the team he leaves behind, and also just a quick mention, the running game.
Do we? Is there anybody other than Saquon Barkley even worth talking about, even for a second?
We got to talk about Barkley too, though. But before we get to them, just Browns wise, the running game, obviously it helps out Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. That's still a wait and see because we don't know how many games Hunt's going to get. I mean, let's assume Hunt wasn't there. I would have Chubb at like my number 6 running back right now. I mean, number 6 overall. He would be blowing up. He'd through the roof because this lid lifter in Odell Beckham would just be that much more beneficial. So those games that Chubb gets as the clear-cut workhorse, whether it's 6 games, whether it's 10 games, he's going to feast and dominate, and maybe that's going to be enough to make it so Kareem Hunt is just a complimentary piece. So Chubb definitely takes a nice little hit up the rankings as well. And if this suspension ends up being longer than we expect, you could put Chubb close to the first round again where he already was ranking. This would have been a move that would have sent him to my top 5, so we still got to wait and see how long that suspension is, but this will undoubtedly help the running game. Looking at the Giants' impact, Saquon Barkley was my locked-in.
Don't take too long on this.
I know. We could do a whole podcast on Odell. The Giants are garbage, and who really gives a shit? But I do want to note, Saquon Barkley was my locked-in number 1 overall pick, but the surrounding talent, it takes a huge hit. It already wasn't high for him at like 12 because you had Odell stretching the field, but now that he's gone, there's no weapon that's going to take any attention away from Barkley. And yes, he'll get more volume because he's that much more of the focal point, but the efficiency is going to take a severe hit when the defense is just keying on him the entire time. In fact, his fantasy points per game last year dropped pretty significantly when Odell was out, dropped by 5 points overall. He had 22 half PPR points, and that went down to like low 18, 17-ish when Odell was out of the lineup. He didn't have that attention getting taken away. His receiving stats surprisingly took a hit when Odell Beckham was there. And then you think back, it makes sense because the middle of the field was so wide open when you had Odell, and then they could just key in on Saquon and put their linebacker, safeties, everyone in the box and make it more congested. There was nobody there separating those guys, so his receiving stats took a hit. And now Saquon drops down to maybe 4 or so on my big board. Below, man, it's tough. Zeke's clearly ahead of him for me. Maybe even McCaffrey and Kamara. And then now it becomes like Barkley, maybe Gurley, who has his own question marks now. I don't know. How far would you drop Barkley in your rankings personally?
Well, I didn't have Barkley number 1 overall, but I did have him very high.
Who was yours, Zeke?
No, I'm first of all, I don't have anything in stone, but man, I'm leaning towards McCaffrey right now.
Yeah, he's so sexy, dude. I don't hate
he's sexy. He's sexy, and I mean, similar to I'm not going all in on Barkley because I just think the Giants are just garbage, and I get it. He's great, and he would rip a big play every game, no matter what. But I just even with Odell Beckham on his team, I was just like, how could you possibly go all in on a guy that's? I mean, it reminds me of like when they went all in on David Johnson like 2 years ago.
I was just gonna say
whatever, and it's like
last year, yeah.
I think Barkley's a better talent.
It's a great comparison.
But I just like, I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable using the number 1 overall pick. I'd want to take somebody where I was pretty damn sure I was going to get something just like guaranteed. So I don't know. McCaffrey's the guy that I'm definitely keeping my eye on. Zeke, it's hard not to love Zeke. Kamara, we'll see. I mean, I have a little bit of I'm a little gun shy with Kamara, but I mean, I could see going that route too. But
now with Ingram gone, that.
Yeah, now with Ingram gone,
Latavius Murray's there, yeah, but like I think that's a pretty steep downgrade going from.
I mean,
Ingram
I put Barkley, 5 lower end of top 5, I guess for me right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. We're going to talk more about Barkley in the future. We're going to talk more about all these guys.
Yeah,
obviously.
Evan Ingram's the last guy, too. Yeah, Evan Ingram's just the one last giant because Sterling Shepard's stats are kind of the same when Odell's been out of the lineup. Obviously, he'll see a little more volume. The efficiency drops. But Evan Ingram's been a monster whenever he's out. He scores at a much higher rate when Beckham's out of the lineup. He averages 4 more fantasy points per game when he's out of the lineup, and it's such a thin position at tight end. I mean, he crushed it last year over those last 4 weeks. I think he was the tight end 2 in fantasy when Beckham was out to end the season. So Evan Ingram gets a nice stock up as well. Other than that, the rest of the Giants take a pretty serious hit.
All right, Antonio Brown, he of the blonde mustache.
Oh, baby.
Heading to the Raiders for a 3rd and 5th round pick. Worth noting, the Patriots offered the Steelers a 2nd and 4th round pick and were rejected, and then proceeded to trade him to Oakland for a 3rd and 5th. First of all, before we move on this one, how would you feel if he had come to the Patriots?
Oh, I would have loved it. I mean, the guys.
Would you have just had a tent pole down there, that and the Beckham thing at the same time? I mean, I don't even know. Like, I wouldn't even be able to talk to you right now, probably.
Oh, no, there'd be no controlling me. A tent pole is an understatement. Well, it'd be more like a tiny little bean pod, but still, if I could sling a tent pole, then that's certainly what would be there. No, Antonio Brown to the Patriots would have been just a wet dream come true. He would have been the perfect fit as those routes, those smooth route running, and Brady would have just made this guy a monster. So I wish that happened. Sadly, it did not, but... in Oakland, I think a lot of people are saying it's a funeral for him, and I don't know about that.
I don't think it's a funeral for him, but I could see this not going great. I mean, I think he is an excellent enough receiver where it's not like it's going to be a huge bust. I don't see that happening. I could definitely see him not losing weight for the Steelers. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes a hit. It's not going to be as valuable as he was with the Steelers. That's a no-brainer. The surrounding talent takes a hit when you go from Big Ben, a potential Hall of Famer that you had great chemistry with, to now Derek Carr. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You're taking a hit there. And then risk-wise, you get the risk that he quit on his team quite often last year, and now he goes to a more combustible potential situation when he's with a less talented stack guy. So maybe he does take a bigger risk hit here. But still, I think the usage is going to stay widely the same. He averaged about 170 targets over his last 6 years in Pittsburgh.
A lot.
It's a lot. It's a heavy amount of volume. But Jon Gruden has schemed up right around 135 targets per game for his wide receiver ones, and that was in a much run-heavier era. So he moves his guys around. He loves to pepper his number one.
He also never had a guy like Antonio Brown.
And he's never had a guy like Antonio Brown.
Let's be real. Antonio Brown is one of the greatest receivers in the history of the NFL. Like exactly. I don't think that's a particularly hot take. I just think that that's just a fact. Look at what this. I remember last year, maybe we were 2/3 of the way through the season, and I said to you, "Hey, who do you think are the top 3 guys in the league in touchdowns?" And you rattled off a couple guys that were like 2nd, 3rd. I was like, well, who's number 1 or something? And you couldn't come up with it for life of you. And I was like, yeah, it's a tough one, Antonio Brown. I mean, and he just kind of quietly had like 11 touchdowns at through 10 games or something. And
right, he ended up with 15 last year.
Yeah, we
Right,
never even
exactly.
noticed that the guy was just like, oh, right, Antonio Brown catches a touchdown every single freaking week, you know?
Yeah, exactly. He's money. I mean, he's still a 30 for 30 individual talent. We just talked about Beckham being one of the best in the game. I do think Antonio Brown, maybe only Hopkins is better, and maybe not. Maybe Antonio Brown's even better than him. It's right up there. Those three are my personal top three.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, he's a perfect 30 for 30 talent-wise. The usage, as we mentioned, doesn't take a huge hit here. And Jon Gruden is already, even last year before they faced the Steelers, was raving Antonio Brown. You can move him anywhere. You can throw it to him when he's covered. There's not a route this guy you can drop and this guy can't run. So he was gushing praise already, and he went out and got his guy. That's the perfect type of wide receiver one main vein for him. And remember, before Amari Cooper ruined it last year, Gruden had 11 out of 11 straight seasons with 1,000-yard or more wide receivers. So his scheme is great for number one receivers. Obviously, Antonio Brown's as good as it gets talent-wise, so usage will be there. So yes, you take a couple hits with surrounding talent, but Derek Carr, I think it's going to get over-exaggerated how bad of a hit this is, because it was just a couple years ago. This guy was in the MVP conversation. He was off 32 touchdowns and nearly 4,000 yards. Last year, he sets career highs in completion percentage at 68% and passing yardage at over 4,000. He has, yes, a pathetic 19 touchdowns, so everyone just forgets that he had probably his best actual career year besides that MVP season under Gruden, and that was with complete garbage to throw to. So you give him Antonio Brown, I think he can make enough plays happen, and maybe Gruden goes out and gets Kyler Murray anyways. He's been linked to him quite a bit. So yes, he takes a hit surrounding talent-wise, risk-wise, but still, he's an absolute monster, and I'm not overreacting here. He's still my top 15 overall. He's my number 4 receiver, or number 5 now that Odell Beckham's jumped in there. He's right after Julio Jones for me. Antonio Brown is leading off that second round type of draft range for me, and I see a lot of people throwing him to the back end of round 2 or saying this is going to be a funeral for him in the Raiders uniform.
Can't do that.
It seems ugly, but it really isn't. I think Antonio Brown's going to feast just as he always has.
Yeah, I think he'll have a really. I mean, let me give you some over-unders, because I heard on another podcast yesterday, a gambling podcast, that about some of his over-unders right now that have come off after the trade to the Ravens. So I know you're a guy that likes the over, always loves the over, right?
Probably gonna hammer it.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're gonna hammer the over, but so anyway, over/under 1,250 receiving yards. What do you think?
I take it over. I have him projected for 1,400 myself.
Okay, and over/under 9.5 touchdowns.
I have 11 touchdowns, so I'll take the over there as well.
Man, you are hammering the over. I'll say all these guys on the podcast all went under on both things.
Really? Okay, yeah, so we're in
like
severe
4 guys.
disagreement here.
I mean, I listened to them a decent amount. Like at least a couple of the guys I take pretty seriously, and they all were just like, no, under, way under. And they said the touchdowns specifically, they were like, yeah, definitely under. So
no, I don't think so. They got no one else to throw to. I mean, Jared Cook led the team in receiving last year, and he's gone this year. He had the 101 targets and 900 yards, 6 TDs. He's gone. So there's literally no one else there. I mean, they signed Tyrell Williams just today, so that only helps because now he has a lift litter.
I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I think Tyrell Williams is really good.
I think Tyrell's definitely a great deep threat. He's going to clear out that space for Antonio Brown to dominate underneath. So I think it's a big move for the entire team, and it helps Antonio Brown even further. So I like that a lot.
Just as an aside, we need to get Grant Cohn on the podcast. I want to hear what he has to say about this. I'll bet he's just losing it right now. He's got to have a lot of thoughts on this.
Who would you take? Antonio Brown? And we're going to talk about the impact on the Steelers, so this kind of transitions to it. But would you take Antonio Brown or JuJu Smith Schuster, who's now the number 1 target over there in Pittsburgh? Where do you lean?
I lean towards Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I do too. So I guess I lean Brown as well. I was hoping we'd get into a little debate here, but I lean Brown as well.
I mean, let's look at JuJu. I mean, and look, the Steelers are obviously a much more established commodity. Okay, but Bell's gone. Now, granted, Bell wasn't there last year, so maybe don't read too much into that. Roethlisberger is just a year older. I mean, he already doesn't look like he used to look. I mean, yeah, he's still a really good quarterback. He's an excellent NFL quarterback. But, I mean, he's not what he used to be. He's a year older. He just lost the guy that's opposite him. I mean, Antonio Brown. Playing opposite Antonio Brown's pretty nice. I know I've seen the splits. And I got to say, the thing, the splits as far as JuJu playing with Antonio Brown and without him, the thing that jumped out at me the most about that is wow, JuJu's really good, because I don't think he was markedly better with or without him. He just he seems like the guy pretty much produces What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what made me and that's what still makes me a little bit nervous here is the fact that you're now going from a clear-cut number 2 attention point of the defense to now the clear-cut number 1. But he's had that happen in the past. Only 3 games so far in his young career that's happened. But the splits are very good in that. He actually averaged 4 more fantasy points per game from 13 to 17. He handled the higher targets and all that quite well. He scored in all 3 games that he had without Antonio Brown, including a monster 9-catch, 143 1 TD effort in Week 17 versus the Browns last year. So this guy has gotten it done without Brown. I am nervous, though. I mean, now that he is the clear cut, you can prepare for him and know that this is the one guy you got to take out of the game. That makes me nervous. The vacated volume is enormous. There's over 240 targets available now with Jesse James and Antonio Brown out. That's the third highest target share in the NFL that's been vacated, and the second most air yards.
That's a value hole right there.
Absolutely, an absolute value hole that JuJu's stepping in and filling. 2,547 available air yards from last year. That's got to go somewhere.
Not air yards.
What's that?
Air target. You said air yards. Air targets.
So 240 targets and 2,500 air yards. So
that's way different. Okay.
That's a significant amount of yards and targets for sure.
A big piece of the aerial pie.
Absolutely, and he is, of course, the main guy to step in and go and take that. I do think he's talented enough to succeed without Antonio Brown, but there is a definite bigger risk with this guy coming into the year. So for me, if it's an Antonio Brown or JuJu debate, and I've seen guys, fantasy giants like Evan Silva of Roto World, who I do respect very much, come out and say it's absolutely JuJu, and it's not even close at this point. And to me, just yes, I get the QB differential, but the risk of now facing number 1 attention for the first time, it offsets that for me, and it favors Antonio Brown. In my opinion. And then other than that, the sneaky sleeper who I wasn't even thinking of, and then it just crossed my mind last night after Jesse James left, was Vance McDonald. He's the only tight end there. Maybe the number 2 target now, but I mean, obviously you got the running backs. They love throwing the running backs there, and James Conner, and maybe now Jalen Samuels picks up some more slack and volume. He played tight end, obviously, in college, and that was a whole debate for another time. But
you gotta remember, he's on Yahoo, he's a tight end.
Anyway, exactly. But he has even more one of my favorite penny stocks. He's going well below 150 in best ball drafts right now. I mean, as a handcuff, he already had a ton of value, and he's got the benefits of the fact that Kevin Colbert said, we want to go back to the committee we had in Week 17. It worked really well for us. So that might be more of a committee backfield. Jalen Samuels could gobble up targets. Has a 60, 70 reception upside right now, and he's getting drafted in the 150s. Makes no sense. But Vance McDonald, athletic freak, seam stretcher, that's going to inherit some of that aerial pie, no doubt. So he's a guy that bumps all the way up from like a no one I was even considering drafting to tight end 8 in my rankings behind Evan Ingram, who we were just talking about. He could have a really big blow up year for the Steelers with such heavy aerial pie available to him.
All right, agreed. And this is gonna be really fun to see how this pans out. And so those are 2 huge trades that landed 2 alpha wide receivers on different teams. We'll see what happens. One makes us really excited. One is kind of wait and see, but make no mistake, we still think both these guys are going to produce like crazy. But let's talk about Le'Veon Bell. I mean, this guy did not play last year, much to our surprise, and I would say the surprise of most people that you asked. Almost nobody thought the guy was going to sit the whole year. Arguably the best fantasy player out there going into last year. Amazing, just second to none pass catcher out of the backfield, like Jamal Charles, but he's been maybe doing it like a little longer. And the guy just hits holes out of the backfield so well. Obviously running behind a pretty good offensive line in Pittsburgh for a while now. Obviously playing with Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, etc. Going to the Jets. Now, I said to you on the pod, I want to say this last podcast, I was like, man, what if he goes to somebody like the Jets? Like, what a disappointment that would be. I specifically said the Jets, and we both kind of had a little laugh about it. He's on the Jets. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely disappointing, especially at first glance. Jets just carry that gross stigma about them. It's not a great They really do. They suck. And their line was the 30th ranked last year. The overall offense was among the lowest point scorers in the league. But there's some reasons for optimism here. I mean, one, you got an amazing talent in Le'Veon Bell, the most versatile guy in the NFL, the premier zone runner that just reads defenses and has the patience and hits the hole at the perfect time. He's such a great runner and then even better as a pass catcher. So you've got this guy that thrives as a versatile workhorse in that facet. And Gase has used versatile workhorses quite well. I get that the last 2 years with the Dolphins, he's really gotten this stigma as an awful committee-style coach that doesn't ever ride a single guy. But I think that's a bit tainted over these last couple of years. Since in 2013 through 2016, this guy was a real workhorse bell cow breeder. Noshawn Moreno had 1,586 yards from scrimmage and 13 total touchdowns. C.J. Anderson racked up nearly 1,200 total yards, 10 TDs, and only 7 starts. Forte had 1,287 yards from scrimmage and 7 TDs in just 13 games. Jay Ajayi, 1,423 yards and 8 TDs in 12 2016 starts. So, I mean, this guy does have a decent track record. I know the recency bias will tell you otherwise, but he has a solid track record developing all-purpose workhorses, and there's no one better than Le'Veon Bell. In fact, he has a quote Gase said just a few years ago describing Ajayi, who this didn't pan out. It ended up fucking trading him away, and it sucked for everybody, but we went all in Ajayi thinking he was going to be the next workhorse because he says, in my offense, I want a guy that can do it all. You can protect the quarterback, you can run the ball, you can catch the ball. We can't just be you're a first and second down back, and then look, we want guys that can stay on the field on all 3 downs. We're not looking to sub personnel. We want to keep, we want to be in great shape, stay out there and just run them. So that way defenses can't key on us. They can't switch out somebody during the drive. We want somebody that starts the drive, that finishes the series, and just has that all-down style back. So that's Gase's offense when it's at its best, when he has those style guys. And there's no one better than Le'Veon Bell. 406 touches the last time he was on the field. The guy can shoulder an offense. We talked about the line sucking, the 30th ranked offensive line by Pro Football Focus. They did add some beef, though. They traded with the Raiders to get Kalishi Osmeli, who was injured all last year. Kind of a shitty season for him because he didn't play much, and when he played, he wasn't effective because he was hurt. But just the year before, when healthy, he was dominant, especially in the run game. 85 overall grade by Pro Football Focus from 2016, 76 the year before. So consistent, solid Pro Football Focus rating, solid guard, and maybe even more importantly, the Jets, despite sucking, were interestingly one of the best zone blocking teams. When they use the outside zone concept, their backs averaged 2.7 yards before contact on those runs, which was the 3rd best in the league, and the outside zone is Le'Veon Bell's staple. So as gross as it all seems on paper, there's really underlying things that you can dig into and say, you know what, there is some upside here. He drops from like 7 or 8 on my rankings because I was hoping he'd go to like a Chiefs or a Buccaneers to now 12-ish. He's still a fringe first rounder in my opinion, though, because I do think there's some sneaky upside. There's always upside when you got a talent like Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to be my obvious question is where do you take this guy? I mean, where do you put him, like 8th amongst backs, maybe?
Yeah, right around RB8. I think there's like 7 guys I have ahead of him. Then there's a nice tier of receivers that I would take over him, that whole DeAndre Hopkins, now Odell Beckham and Julio Jones tier. But I would take Le'Veon Bell right at the end of the first round, right ahead of James Conner, I would say, is where I slide him. So Gordon's right above Le'Veon Bell, and then James Conner right below him is kind of where I slide him into my running back rankings.
Do you think if somebody's like, I guess this doesn't come up too much, but I mean, if you're in a keeper league or something like that, multiple keepers, and maybe somebody's like, oh my gosh, Le'Veon Bell's going to the Jets. I mean, you'd be interested. You'd be a buyer, right?
If they're going to sell him for cheap, because it is going to work.
Well, right. I mean, obviously it depends on the price, but.
Yeah. You're saying would I buy Le'Veon Bell or would I be trying to sell him?
No, would you be a buyer if somebody was like, oh man, he went to the Jets, I got to get off this guy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a workhorse, and like I said, there's underrated pieces of upside that get kind of clouded in the shittiness that was the Jets. Never mind the fact that, Sam Darnold takes the next step as a quarterback. Gase is supposed to be a quarterback whisperer. If he takes that next step, they got some decent receivers on the outside and the offense just takes a leap forward. Then maybe Bell could really explode here if he gets that volume that Adam Gase used to give his guys and this offense does take that next step. There is some upside. There's, of course, the injury risk too. Bell's missed significant time in multiple seasons, but overall, yeah, I'd be a buyer. Anytime you can get a 3-down horse in an ascending offense, I think the Jets do take a step forward as an offense, and I think Bell could have himself a decent season. So if somebody's like, oh, this is gross, and they're trying to sell him low, I'm all in. I'd buy him, yeah.
What do you think of Sam Darnold this year?
I like Darnold. I think he is a legit quarterback, and I think he does. I think Gase can develop QBs quite well. He'll put him in some good positions to succeed. They got a nice slot weapon in Jamison Crowder, so there's not like a true number one there, but Anderson's obviously got the speed to burn down the defense. You got a nice slot weapon in Crowder, and Noon was a big body that can move the chains as well. So between Bell and those three receivers, and then Herndon, a solid tight end, there's just like, it's not sexy, but it's enough to move the ball, I think, pretty efficiently. So I'm into it.
All right. You heard it here, folks. This is our Roto Street Journal mega super gigantic trade / best free agent on the market show. We talk about OBJ, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. But we're actually going to come back probably tomorrow. Do you want to tell the people what your audio is breaking up a little bit right now, just so you know. Your shitty microphone is really being exposed right now. So rather than kick it over to you, I'm just going to say right now, tomorrow when we talk, we're going to go risers, fallers, penny stocks. Obviously, there's still a few big ones. We've got the Coleman signing. We've got Golden Tate still without a home. Might not be the case by tomorrow. Lots of dominoes left to fall. We're going to cover it all tomorrow. I want to kick it to the Wolf, but I mean, everything he says is just garbled static right now. You just heard it there, folks. So you're going to appreciate that at the end of this podcast. Obviously, my name's Nat the Truth Jones. With me, as always, is the Wolf, and we'll be back tomorrow to finish this stuff up, and hopefully the Wolf will have a more competent microphone by then. But we hope you guys enjoyed it. Episode 71 in the books. We'll see you tomorrow for episode 72. Later. Yeah, everything you're saying is like...
Starting just towards the end there?
It was like the last minute.
Oh, okay. So at least it wasn't.
I started like doing this at one point.
Yeah,